Even as we grieve, we give thanks for this most faithful life. I pray for the guidance and help of Almighty God.
A somber mood has fallen over the royal family as King Charles and Prince William have jointly confirmed heartbreaking news regarding Queen Camilla's future role behind the palace gates. Whispers of uncertainty had been growing, but no one expected the announcement to be this devastating. Insiders say the decision was reached after difficult conversations, emotional moments, and a stark realization about what lies ahead. How will this reshape the monarchy? And what does it mean for Camilla's place in the royal future? Stay tuned, because this revelation changes everything.
That by your service and ministry, justice and mercy may be seen in all the earth.
King Charles and William's silent verdict. A few days earlier, on November 8th, the atmosphere inside London's Royal Albert Hall felt almost sacred. Soft beams of red and gold lit the room for the Festival of Remembrance. Casting gentle shadows over the royal family, Camilla stood beside King Charles, her hand resting lightly on his arm, as if she were both partner and protector. She smiled at the hymns, bowed at the prayers, and held herself with that familiar air of quiet confidence. To the cameras, it was a portrait of unity, steady, graceful, calm. But those who were close enough to watch the king's face noticed something far more telling. Charles's expression didn't match the warmth of the moment. It wasn't anger, and it wasn't affection. It was a kind of distance, like someone pulling back from a truth they could no longer ignore. And tonight, that distance didn't stay hidden. It became royal action. Behind palace walls, father and son, King Charles and Prince William, had finally spoken with one voice. Publicly, the decision was described as administrative, a simple adjustment to royal duties. But the insiders who whispered behind closed doors all used the same word: final. Outside Buckingham Palace, rain drifted through the November fog, soaking the reporters who had gathered for what they sensed would be a turning point. Inside, the Queen's private rooms remained lit long after the rest of the palace had gone dark. She hadn't released a statement. Perhaps she didn't need to. Sometimes the most powerful response is the one wrapped in silence, a silence that exposes everything no one dares say aloud. The truth is, the decision had been made long before it was ever written down. That same evening, Charles held a private meeting with William. According to a palace aide, the conversation lasted barely 20 minutes. It ended with the king's quiet but steady declaration: "This must come from both of us, not as father and son, but as crown and heir." Within hours, the foundations of the joint announcement were drafted. It wouldn't remove titles. It wouldn't accuse Camilla of wrongdoing. Such dramatic action could destabilize a monarchy already weakened by health concerns, public scrutiny, and constant whispers of scandal. Instead, the statement took a different shape, one of polished language, soft on the surface, sharp in its meaning. It spoke of integrity, transparency, and renewed dedication to service. But behind those gentle words was something far harsher: punishment disguised as procedure, mercy shaped to look like control. When the final version reached Camilla, she read it twice. She didn't sign it. She didn't have to. Everything she needed to understand was already buried between the lines. That night, she returned to Clarence House. Staff members reported that she dismissed her driver earlier than usual and spent the night alone in her drawing room. On a small table beside her sat an unsealed envelope addressed only with 3 words: "To my king." She didn't write more. She didn't need to. By dawn, the corridors of the monarchy felt changed, like something important had cracked, quietly and permanently. The joint statement went public, barely 100 words long, yet heavy enough to shake every newsroom in Britain. It simply announced that Queen Camilla would step back from her individual public duties, and that the king and his heir stood firmly united in their commitment to transparency and the preservation of royal heritage. The public heard diplomacy. The palace heard exile. That night, Clarence House shut down its private wing. Secretaries were reassigned, press officers replaced, and an unsettling quiet settled over the halls. Camilla refused every phone call, every offer of sympathy. Only one aide saw her standing at the window, watching the rain blur the city lights and whispering, "They've rewritten my purpose." Meanwhile, at Windsor Castle, Charles sat with William and Princess Anne for a private dinner. No cameras, no speeches, just the quiet truth between three people who carried the weight of a kingdom. Charles looked tired, older than usual. "It's done," he finally said. She was never the enemy, only the storm. Anne, ever blunt, responded, "The crown doesn't survive storms through kindness. It survives through silence." William said little, but he understood exactly what this decision would cost and why it had to be made. And this breaking point leads to one question that has haunted the palace for years. How did the whole thing truly begin? And what hidden moment set this storm in motion? Stay tuned. Camilla and the monarchy's hidden power. To understand how the monarchy reached this fragile moment, we need to look back, far from the cameras, far from the headlines, and deep inside the quiet rooms where real power shifts. When Charles finally took the throne, the world witnessed a man stepping into destiny and a woman stepping into the role she had waited decades to claim. For many, Camilla's rise felt like the final chapter of a long, messy story. She had endured scandal, anger, and the persistent shadow of Diana, but she had outlasted them all. And beneath her softer public image lay a woman who had mastered the art of subtle control. She didn't need to raise her voice or push her way forward. She learned instead to move with a quiet certainty, guiding decisions without ever looking like she was the one guiding them. In the early months of Charles's reign, she was viewed as a true partner, gracious, calm, always ready with a gentle smile. The press praised her reading room initiative, calling it proof that she was stepping into a cultural, thoughtful role. But power, once tasted, tends to root itself in places unseen. Soon, insiders began whispering about what they half-jokingly called the Camilla Doctrine, a way of ruling through influence, persuasion, and carefully built alliances, while the public believed Charles was simply pacing himself for health reasons. Those behind palace walls saw something different forming in the background. With the king's schedule shrinking under medical advice, Camilla began gathering a small circle at Clarence House. Three people she trusted deeply: a retired journalist, a former political aide, and an old family friend. At first, these gatherings felt harmless, companionship for a queen who had suddenly become one of the most watched women in the world. But slowly, companionship turned into counsel. Then counsel turned into quiet control. Reports, speeches, and schedules started flowing through her hands before reaching the king. Her tone never changed, polite, steady, reassuring, but the weight of her presence grew heavier in every room. Protocol officers noticed small changes, not enough to spark alarm, but just enough to show a shift. Orders of precedence adjusted, patronages moved, meetings rearranged. Slowly, quietly, the rhythm of the monarchy began to revolve around her decisions. William and Catherine maintained their diplomacy, watching closely, but offering no public objection. Princess Anne, though, saw what others tried to ignore. In a private moment, she warned Charles, calling it a court within a court, a dangerous echo from royal history. Charles defended Camilla, insisting she was helping him carry the burden, not trying to take it. He trusted her completely, maybe too completely. By late 2025, the shift was nearly invisible to the outside world, yet fully recognized by those inside it. Camilla had become a quiet center of gravity, with influence stretching from palace corridors to political offices. And with every choice she shaped, the line between support and control blurred a little more. Then a startling revelation emerged, exposing a major discrepancy uncovered during auditing, sending shockwaves through the palace. What secret did it reveal? And how deep did the ripple go? Keep watching to find out. How a missing artifact sparked Camilla's rise. It began quietly, almost too quietly, in the last week of September. A routine audit was underway in the Royal Collections Office in Edinburgh. Nothing unusual, nothing dramatic, the kind of administrative check that is usually passed without anyone outside the archives even knowing it happened. But this time, something small, barely noticeable, slipped through the cracks. A few artifacts listed under the king's personal trust couldn't immediately be located. Normally, such a hiccup would be sorted out by the chief curator, logged, corrected, and forgotten. But what happened next raised eyebrows across the palace. Before the curator could even begin the standard review, orders arrived from a different office entirely, Queen Camilla's private office. Her Majesty will review this personally. Those 6 words changed everything. To the public, it would have sounded harmless, possibly even dutiful, but to palace insiders, it was a sharp break from long-standing tradition. Matters of heritage, archives, and artifact oversight had always belonged to the sovereign, not to the consort. And yet, within days, Camilla's tight inner circle quietly arranged a private consultation with an independent broker in Antwerp. The goal, they claimed, was to verify the provenance of certain loaned items. But the palace communications team wasn't told. They only discovered the meeting after it happened. And that's when the murmurs began. Not loud, not angry, just uneasy. It's not about the missing pieces, one senior courtier admitted later. It's about who decided what mattered. While whispers circulated through hallways and behind closed doors, King Charles remained largely unaware. At Clarence House, her weekly gatherings continued. They weren't listed on the official royal schedule, yet everyone who mattered knew they existed. Over Earl Grey and neatly arranged folders, she spoke about heritage stewardship, modern optics, protocol alignment, topics that sounded harmless but hinted at something deeper, something strategic. Her allies said she was simply doing the work no one else had the energy to handle. Her critics whispered a different story. This was preparation, positioning, quiet expansion of influence. Then, the subtle shift happened. By early October, new public documents described Her Majesty's oversight of ceremonial management, a phrase that looked formal, accurate, polished, but it blurred a line no one had ever dared blur before. The line between the sovereign's authority and the consort's. Princess Anne spotted it immediately. During a routine council meeting, a paper crossed her desk referencing Camilla's direction in artifact preservation. Anne paused, looked up, and asked the question everyone else had avoided. Why is this coming from the Queen's office, not the King's? The room went silent, the kind of silence that freezes the air. Every answer sounded scripted, every explanation too careful. William's concerns surfaced next. One of his senior aides sent a discreet note to Kensington Palace, warning that the Queen's advisory network appeared to be operating beyond standard remit. Catherine, calm and strategic as always, urged patience. "Let the dust settle," she told her husband. "The crown has survived worse by waiting, not reacting." But William had studied royal history closely. He knew how often trouble swelled while everyone else stayed quiet, until silence itself became the mistake no one could undo. Still, Camilla left no visible trail. Every action, however unconventional, could be defended as efficient. Every decision could be spun as loyalty to the monarchy's legacy. And publicly, she was flawless. Gracious smiles, soft speeches, unwavering devotion to the king's image. But beneath that calm, she moved with precision. She broke no rules. She simply bent them, expertly, subtly, confidently. And suddenly, Camilla crossed the line, pushing past every expectation. But how did she climb so quickly? And what secret maneuver shifted the balance entirely? Let's uncover it. The shadow reign, how Camilla quietly took center stage. By late October, a subtle but undeniable shift had taken hold within the palace walls. Whispered observations became repeated notes in press briefings. Camilla, not Charles, was increasingly seen as the steady hand guiding the monarchy. Her office stayed deliberately quiet. Denial would only amplify the perception of her growing influence. As the Festival of Remembrance approached, she took charge of the entire program. From guest lists to seating arrangements to the public, the event radiated unity, dignity, and tradition. Yet insiders noticed the smallest, almost imperceptible detail. On internal documents, the king's name appeared beneath the queen's. To outsiders, it was trivial. To palace veterans steeped in decades of protocol, it was seismic. In a monarchy where hierarchy is everything, even minor shifts can resonate like thunder. By early November, the palace operated like a machine running slightly off-beat. Officially, everything was fine. The king's doctors assured the public of steady progress. Courtiers smiled through every public appearance, and the royal schedule ticked along without hiccup. But inside, the rhythm had quietly changed. Meetings that once began with Charles's calm, measured voice now started with Camilla guiding the discussion. Documents that previously passed through the private secretary flowed first to her liaison office. Observers inside Clarence House began referring to this quiet reordering as the shadow reign, a careful, invisible redistribution of power that no one dared name aloud. Within her inner circle, Camilla's team moved like clockwork. Lady Sarah Chichester meticulously reviewed patron lists, ensuring supporters could be relied upon should controversy arise. Rupert Kane monitored media narratives, deciding which stories to highlight and which to suppress. Fiona Lyle, the strategist with political experience, prepared contingency notes for every conceivable scandal, a form of optical insurance designed to protect not just Camilla but the monarchy itself. Their immediate priority, the Festival of Remembrance on November 8th, the monarchy's most solemn and visible public ceremony of the year. Every gesture, every glance, every seat placement would send a message louder than any speech. On the day of the festival, grey skies and drizzle blanketed London, while poppies glowed against black coats. As the royal motorcade approached the Royal Albert Hall, cameras captured the moment the world had long anticipated. King Charles and Queen Camilla walking arm in arm beneath a sea of applause. To the public, it was a picture of unity. To insiders, it was carefully choreographed optics. From the first step inside, Camilla commanded the scene. She guided the king to his seat, acknowledged veterans with a precise nod, and positioned herself perfectly beneath the glass dome, ensuring she dominated the visual narrative. When the national anthem ended, one image dominated the next morning's headlines. Camilla's composed, unwavering gaze, the king positioned subtly behind her. Social media erupted, calling her monarch in all but name, while royal reporters whispered about the growing reality behind the ceremonial facade. But not everyone watched silently. Princess Anne's reaction was swift, sharp. How did she confront this quiet takeover and challenge the Queen's rising shadow without fracturing the royal family? Let's delve into the details. The royal confrontation that shook the palace. Inside the palace, Princess Anne's fury was palpable. To her, the recent events struck at the very heart of royal tradition. During the nation's most solemn remembrance ceremony, the Queen Consort had taken a step beyond what anyone thought appropriate, eclipsing the king in a display Anne found intolerable. "This is not service. This is show," she was overheard murmuring, her voice sharp with disbelief. That evening, she summoned William to Kensington Palace. Behind closed doors, they began drafting what would later be known as the Integrity Memo, a confidential report highlighting breaches of protocol and urging the king to reassert a clear hierarchy. William, listening carefully, admitted, "I've always defended her, but this feels more like strategy than loyalty." Meanwhile, at Clarence House, Camilla's inner circle celebrated quietly. Rupert Kane handed her the morning papers with a headline reading, "Camilla steadies the crown."
I'm from the DRC.
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, please.
Very nice to see you.
Amid King's fragile health, she allowed herself a brief satisfied smile. "Optics," she murmured, "are everything." But the moment of triumph was short-lived. A private secretary delivered urgent news. The Ministry of Culture had requested clarification on the Royal Collection inquiry in Edinburgh regarding a missing item, an artifact Camilla had handled discreetly through Antwerp. The email had been copied to the King's office, the Prime Minister's team, and Princess Anne. Instantly, the circle's attention sharpened. Overnight, the palace felt smaller, every move under scrutiny. When King Charles was briefed, his reaction was measured, yet firm. She meant no harm, he told Anne, but Anne's reply was precise and unwavering. She has crossed too many lines. Then you must draw one." The next morning, an emergency meeting was convened at Windsor, a gathering absent from all official calendars, signaling the gravity of the situation. Camilla arrived composed, draped in a deep green gown, the color of endurance and quiet authority. William and Anne stood at the king's side, 3 generations of Windsor facing a storm they had long hoped to avoid. The discussion lasted less than an hour. When it concluded, the Queen bowed her head, whispered briefly to the king, and left without a backward glance. Outside, the press corps had already gathered, anticipation thick in the air, while rumors of a forthcoming statement swirled through Westminster. For the first time in months, it was clear that the king's voice, not hers, would steer what came next. And as London stirred beneath the morning rain, even the most loyal insiders understood the significance. A decisive moment had arrived, and the consequences would ripple through the monarchy like never before. Upon hearing this, King Charles made a shocking move that left everyone reeling, a move aimed at restoring the royal legacy. Stay with us as we unpack every astonishing detail. King Charles confronts the Queen's shadow power. The morning after the Festival of Remembrance, Britain awoke to headlines that sent shockwaves through the palace walls. Camilla commands the crown. Queen overshadows the king. Even the most cautious outlets framed the night as a striking reversal of royal order. In the monarchy, perception is power, and the perception had shifted, quietly but irreversibly. Every whispered conversation, every editorial line seemed to signal the same truth. The balance of influence had tilted, and the palace could no longer ignore it. At Windsor, the air was thick with tension. King Charles convened his closest advisors for what insiders called a meeting of clarity. The word crisis was never spoken, yet it hung in the room like a silent storm. In the oak-paneled chamber, Princess Anne sat composed yet fierce, her hands resting on a stack of meticulously organized documents. Across from her, William's face was carved in restraint, a mask of controlled concern. Camilla's absence from the table said more than words could, leaving a subtle but unmistakable impression of the shift in power. The meeting began quietly. Charles, pale but steady, requested an update on the Royal Collection inquiry. The curator's explanation confirmed suspicions long held in whispers. An unrecorded artifact had been temporarily stored in an auxiliary archive, not under royal supervision, but under the care of a private broker commissioned by Camilla's office. No laws were broken, but protocol, sacred to the monarchy, had been bypassed. William leaned forward, voice deliberate. "This isn't about jewels or documents. It's about trust. If the crown bends its own rules, the whole institution collapses." Anne's calm, icy nod reinforced the point. "We are guardians, not owners." That line must never blur. For a long moment, Charles remained silent, eyes fixed on the folder before him. Photographs, statements, and timelines all pointed to the same conclusion. The Queen had acted without authorization, even if her intent was to preserve dignity. Loyalty warred with duty, and the crown's weight pressed heavily upon him. Finally, he spoke. "Summon her."
I've been actually trying to keep quiet about reaching 3/4 of a century.
When Camilla entered the room that afternoon, she embodied composure, dressed in black and pearls, her expression unreadable. She greeted Charles first, then acknowledged Anne and William with a subtle nod. "I see we're holding court," she said, softly. Charles motioned to the documents. "Explain this." Camilla's gaze shifted between the papers and the king. "The item was misplaced, not mishandled. I acted to protect the monarchy from embarrassment, nothing more." Anne's eyes narrowed. "By bypassing proper channels, that is not protection, that is possession." Camilla's expression flickered, betraying the sting beneath her calm. "I've given this family 20 years of stability. Every scandal, every headline, I absorbed to keep the rest of you untarnished. And this is loyalty's reward?" William's tone, measured yet firm, cut through the stillness. Loyalty doesn't excuse control. For the first time in years, Camilla's composure faltered. "I sought order, dignity, protection for a man who has devoted his life to this country." Charles closed his eyes, the weight of truth pressing down. Exhaustion, not anger, marked the end of the confrontation. leaving everyone to ponder the delicate balance of authority and influence. Now, how will the public respond to this storm inside the palace? And what will ripple through the kingdom next? Stay tuned as we unfold the process of monarchy restoration. Stability after palace turmoil. By the time the announcement reached the public, opinion was sharply divided. Some hailed King Charles for his decisiveness, praising the firm hand he had placed on the monarchy's reins. Others, loyal to Camilla, whispered of polite cruelty, a measured punishment wrapped in ceremonial language. Across the Atlantic, American talk shows debated whether this was careful reform or a quiet act of revenge. Once again, the Queen had become a symbol, not of scandal, but of consequence, and her influence had been felt across continents. Inside the palace, operations shifted into overdrive. Princess Anne stepped into the breach, assuming interim oversight of the Integrity and Heritage Committee, coordinating meticulously with museum curators, cultural advisors, and senior aides. Catherine's schedule, meanwhile, subtly expanded. More public appearances, more engagement with charitable projects, more quiet contrasts. Against the backdrop of the reshaped royal hierarchy, King Charles carried on with his engagements. Each smile measured, each movement slightly slower. But for the first time in decades, the monarchy appeared steady. Yet that steadiness came at a cost: one woman's silence. At Clarence House, Camilla prepared to leave for her private residence at Ray Millstaff recalled her, pausing before closing her study door, her gaze lingering on the portrait of her coronation. "You wanted a monarchy of peace," she whispered to the reflection, staring back. "Now you have it." Then, with quiet dignity, she stepped away from the frame of history she had fought to enter, leaving behind a palace restored and a silence that would never fully be explained. The morning after the statement, London woke beneath a pale winter sky. Flags above Buckingham fluttered weakly in the November wind. For the first time in years, no reporters waited outside Clarence House. The frenzy had passed, leaving only quiet, so thick it felt ceremonial, as if the city itself understood that something solemn had been lost. On paper, the monarchy had stabilized. King Charles resumed his role as the unchallenged figurehead. Princess Anne moved confidently into her expanded duties, and William and Catherine projected unity and calm. Palace briefings spoke of renewal, transparency, and integrity. But beneath the polished surface, an unspoken truth remained. Every act of preservation carries a cost, and every throne demands sacrifice. Camilla had retreated to Ray Mill House, her Wiltshire sanctuary. There, among rolling hills, she returned to private routines, walking her dogs, answering letters, reading in quiet solitude. To the public, her withdrawal seemed graceful. To those who knew her, it felt like exile in the guise of composure. One friend whispered to a reporter, "She's not angry, she's simply finished." And yet, history rarely ends where we expect. The same woman once labeled both villain and survivor now stood as a cautionary figure in pearls, caught between loyalty and ambition. Whether she had overstepped or been misunderstood no longer mattered. What mattered was perception. She had tried to protect the crown, and in doing so, had forced the crown to protect itself. Beyond crowns and palaces, this story is profoundly human. How often do we grip control tightly, believing it equals care, only to discover that letting go is the truest measure of strength? Camilla had long mastered patience as her shield, but the line between restraint and secrecy is fragile. Once crossed, even acts meant to preserve can look like dominance. For King Charles, signing the joint statement with his son may linger as a sorrow deeper than any scandal. Leadership demanded it. Duty over affection, legacy over comfort. The monarchy endures because it bends, reshapes, and sometimes ruthlessly redraws boundaries. Camilla's fall was not sudden, it was inevitable. The system she helped uphold could never allow her this type of power. Ambition, even loyal ambition, must answer to consequence. Love bound to legacy is always tested by time. And in the House of Windsor, peace is never freely given. It is purchased, one broken heart at a time. So, how did you see Queen Camilla now? A protector of the crown or its greatest risk? We would love to hear your thoughts in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.